So I'll keep rolling. I'll only say that if they had discovered any Gospels in the Dead Sea Scrolls, it would have been the greatest possible proof of Jesus' divinity, since they were from about 200 BC. So,
sorry, I might have missed this. Who are the Qumran?
oh yeah, sorry. So they were the Qumran. They're just called the Qumran Caves. So that's just the name of the area. And so there was.
It was only on half volume.
So it was. It's just the name of the people who is the name of the caves, the area of the cave, the area where the caves with the documents were. They believed that people were living there, so they called them the Qumran community, like they would call us the Wurundjeri community or whatever, or Mudjara barbarians, if you will, if you follow that Facebook page.
Weren't they the Essenes, though, the people?
Okay, yeah, that's a good observation. There is a high probability that they were. Basically, everybody thinks that they were. There are a few stick-in-the-muds who will quibble about that, but basically, yeah, it's the Essenes were. You're almost certainly correct. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. You're correct. They were Essenes because they lived like Essenes. They did the stuff the Essenes did, and they didn't.
Do you want to define Essenes for us?
Yeah, there were a few groups around, a few different types of Jewish groups around at the time of Christ. One was the Sadducees, who were in good with the government, the ruling government, the Roman authority. The other were the Pharisees, who were it was important to them to live righteous and upright lives. And if you wanted to pick on them, you could call them a little bit legalistic. But they were doing it out of, I think, the best, in their minds, the best possible motives. They're trying to, for goodness sake, we were carried into Babylon, we were carried into exile because we didn't honor the Sabbath, and I forgot the other one. There were the prophets gave them two sins in particular. They said were the cause of being probably abandoning God. But there was some specific thing, abandoning the Sabbath and something to do with sacrifices. Anyway, they wanted to get everything exactly right. That was the Pharisees, and they didn't particularly like the Sadducees, but the Sadducees were in charge of the temple government, of certain aspects of the temple, because they had powerful friends. Then there were some people who said, you know what, Pharisees, you haven't gone far enough. The whole lot, you're all messed up. We're going into the woods. They were called the Essenes, and they lived in remote communities, had obsessive fixation on purification. Often no women were allowed. Sorry, you're impure. And they had they were much more legalistic than the Pharisees. Although interestingly, it appears that there's a good case to be made. Who came out from the wilderness, yelling out, "Repent! The day of the Lord is coming." That John the Baptist. So there's a good chance. Some people have speculated he had a really old mom and dad. He came from the wilderness. He dressed like an Essene. He did the things that Essenes did. He may have been, we know the Essenes adopted kids. He may well have been, if his parents died in his youth, he may well have been adopted by the Essene community. So anyways, they lived further out. Basically, they lived further out, and they often were critical of the temple, and the whole thing is corrupt. Outside of that, there was another group that was zealous for change, and they were called the Zealots, and they wanted to make change happen now. Yes, we can. And so they killed Romans when they could. A little stiletto with a little knife that they would right into the back or wherever they could.
Different Jewish communities were more like denominations for Christianity. Is a good way to compare them?
If you imagine Christian denominations brawling more often. They actually hated each other. In fact, the Jews would have lasted longer at Masada, when they were under siege at Masada, if one Jewish community came and burned the crops, burned the food supplies of one of the other Jewish communities, so that they would fall more quickly. There was that much hatred.
So would you say it's like the scene in The Life of Brian, where the Palestinian front, or the Liberation Front of Palestine, is talking about those traitors in the Palestinian Front of Liberation or something?
I'm not sure, but I like your historical instinct to link everything back to Monty Python. That's surely not misplaced. It's been a while since I saw that.
That's when they're saying, what did the Romans give us?
Roads.
Well, except for roads. Aqueducts? Except for roads and aqueducts. What did the Romans ever do for us? Yeah, like that. Okay, so now we'll get into the Dead Sea Scrolls. But Qumran is the neighborhood, and that's where the caves were.